Let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're tracking a literal microscopic war happening right beneath your skin, from the very first moment a microbe breaches your defenses all the way to the final stages of recovery. But before we even talk about getting sick, we kind of need to rethink what it actually means to be healthy. Because the truth is, you are never truly alone. You're currently hosting millions upon millions of microscopic guests. We almost always think of bacteria and microbes as the enemy, right? But right now, your body is maintaining this beautifully complex symbiosis with a massive population of what we call microbiota. These are microbes just living their best life inside you without causing any disease whatsoever. In fact, most of them are in a relationship with you that's either completely neutral or actively keeping you alive.
Seriously, your respiratory tract, your skin, your digestive system, they are completely packed with normal, mostly helpful microbiota. From the incredibly diverse microbial populations hanging out in your oral cavity, to the protective gram-positive bacteria living right on the surface of your skin, you are essentially a thriving, walking planet for these life forms. And as long as everyone stays in their designated zones, this symbiotic relationship keeps you functioning perfectly.
But of course, things don't always stay peaceful. The inciting incident for our biological drama really kicks off when this delicate balance gets hijacked by a villain, a pathogen. Disease happens when that neutral or helpful relationship suddenly turns parasitic. All of a sudden, the microbe is benefiting, but the host, that's you, is taking active damage. And that's the fundamental definition of a pathogen. It's a microscopic entity that crosses the line from being a harmless resident or a random passerby into a full-blown attacker.
So, where do these attacks actually come from? Well, if a brand new pathogen breaks through your external defenses from the outside world, that's what we call an exogenous infection. But sometimes, the call is coming from inside the house. If your normal, friendly microbiota somehow wander into sterile tissues where they absolutely do not belong, that creates an endogenous infection. And if your body's environment shifts and suddenly favors the microbe, those everyday commensals can take advantage, resulting in an opportunistic infection.
Now here's a massive misconception. People constantly use the words infection and disease like they mean the exact same thing, but medically speaking, they are entirely different events. Being infected just means the microbes have successfully colonized you, they've set up camp. But having a disease means your body is actually damaged or malfunctioning because of that camp. You can totally have an infection without it immediately causing a disease. But when that infection leads to a measurable deviation from your normal biological function, that is when the alarms really start sounding.
Once a disease takes hold, doctors basically have to play detective to figure out what's going wrong. And they do this by looking for objective, measurable signs while also listening to your subjective, completely unmeasurable symptoms. A sign is clinical. Anyone can verify it. It's a change in your vital signs, like your resting heart rate jumping over 100 beats per minute, a spike in body temp, or antibodies showing up on a lab test. A symptom, on the flip side, is totally subjective. It's just what you feel: nausea, loss of appetite, and aching pain. Symptoms are super important clues, but they're inherently biased and almost impossible to measure precisely. To make sense of all these clues, medical professionals group these specific signs and symptoms into syndromes, and they use this incredibly precise language of prefixes and suffixes to pinpoint exactly where the microscopic battle is happening. Take the prefix HEPA. That immediately tells you the liver is involved. Add the suffix itis, which means inflammation, put them together, and hepatitis tells you exactly what and where the problem is: inflammation of the liver. Bacteremia simply means bacteria is present in the blood. It's basically a highly specific code used to map out the battlefield. Okay, let's look at how this plays out in a real world. We can actually map out 5 distinct stages of an illness using the flu as our prime suspect. From the exact second you inhale that invisible flu virus from, say, a coughing coworker, your body kicks off a highly choreographed sequence. We're going to break down exactly what happens to the pathogen numbers and your symptoms at each of these 5 critical phases. Stage 1 is the incubation period. The pathogen is inside you, and it's quietly starting to multiply. But importantly, your symptom severity is completely flat. During this incubation window, the pathogen numbers are still way too low to trigger any noticeable signs or symptoms of disease. Technically, you're infected, but you feel absolutely fine. No idea what's coming.
Then we hit the prodromal period, and things start to shift. The invaders' numbers are steadily climbing, but more importantly, your symptom severity begins to rise right along with it. Why? Well, because your immune system has finally woken up to the threat. This period is all about general, vague discomfort. You get that mild fever, maybe some muscle soreness or swelling. Interestingly, this isn't just the virus hurting you. A lot of this is actually the collateral damage from your own immune system spinning up its defenses.
Which brings us to the peak of the whole ordeal, the period of illness. Both the pathogen numbers and your symptom severity absolutely skyrocket to their maximum levels. This is where those vague signs and symptoms become highly specific, blindingly obvious, and at their absolute worst. If it's the flu, this is the part where you're completely bedridden, burning up with a high fever, severe joint aches, and intense fatigue. The microscopic battle is raging at its fiercest point.
Thankfully, in most cases, your immune system wins the upper hand, and you enter the period of decline. Pathogen numbers drop off, and your symptoms finally start to fade. But a quick word of caution here. During this decline, your immune system is completely exhausted, which leaves you temporarily super vulnerable to picking up secondary infections. If you navigate that safely, you finally reach convalescence. You get back to normal, though it is worth noting that some truly severe diseases can leave behind permanent damage that the body just can't fully repair.
Now, it's super important to remember that this chronological roller coaster doesn't follow a rigid schedule. It speeds up or slows way down, depending on a bunch of different variables. The specific microbe matters immensely. Tuberculosis behaves radically differently than botulism. It also depends on the host and their developmental stage. A young child might process this timeline very differently than an elderly adult. And crucially, comorbidities like obesity or just the baseline status of your immune system can drastically alter how fast you move through these 5 periods.
And the overall aftermath? That varies wildly too. We basically look at 3 different durations for diseases. Acute diseases, like the flu, hit fast and vanish quickly, usually within hours, days, or maybe a few weeks. Chronic diseases, on the other hand, can linger for months, years, or literally your entire lifetime, like chronic gastritis caused by the H. pylori bacterium. And then there are latent diseases. These are definitely the trickiest. The pathogen sneakily goes dormant, meaning absolutely no active replication, just to hide from your immune system, only to potentially reactivate way down the line. Think of the viruses that cause herpes or chickenpox.
So, with all these complex timelines and tricky dormant bugs, how do scientists actually prove which microbe is causing which disease? Well, since 1884, they've relied on Koch's postulates. It's this rigorous 4-step detective method. First, you identify the suspected microbe in a sick individual. Second, you isolate and grow it, which, by the way, is incredibly difficult since less than 1% of microbes actually grow in a lab setting. Third, you infect a healthy animal model. And finally, you re-isolate the microbe from that model to confirm it caused the exact same disease. It's a crucial feedback loop that separates the real culprits from the innocent microbial bystanders.
All of this leaves us with a pretty wild final thought about subclinical or asymptomatic infections. Someone could be sitting there confidently saying, "I feel amazing," while their lungs are literally speckled with replicating viruses. If a microscopic invasion has already started, and those pathogens are actively multiplying during that silent incubation period, but you have 0 subjective symptoms or obvious clinical signs yet, how well do you really know your own ecosystem? It's a staggering reminder that health isn't just about how we feel in the moment. It's this invisible, ongoing, high-stakes balance of millions of tiny lives inside us.